versa, of people being taken away for what they think is an hour and it's 2 months, or they think is 2 months and it's an hour. So we have centuries of tradition of fairy myth and fairy folklore, which fit, they just overlay perfectly with the real aliens and space beings that we are still that are still contacting us, and vice versa.
Brad, where do you get the book, Real Aliens, Space Beings, and Creatures from Other Worlds?
Oh, let's hope that it's in every bookstore. And, of course, you can get it from Amazon. You can get it from Barnes & Noble. There are many other online bookstores. Or, honest to gosh, there are still some bookstores left. So
there are a few out there.
Yeah,
but Amazon's become the biggest bookstore, I think. Huh?
It has. It has.
What's new with Sherry these days?
Well, as I said, we're working on the second edition of Conspiracies and Secret Societies, and just overwhelmed with material that we're getting from literally all over the world.
And you just updated your werewolf book.
Oh, yes, and I can't wait to talk to you about that. This is bigger and better and in every way. I loved our first werewolf book. I thought that turned out wonderfully, but it's been updated. It has new movies and new novels, and I mean, it's the works. I'm just really proud of this.
You got
I'm really excited about it.
Brad, thanks so much for spending the hour with us. Special 4-hour report on ETs. More to come on Coast to Coast. And as we continue with our special report on ETs and abductions, up next, Kim Carlsberg joins us, The Art of Close Encounters on Coast to Coast AM. And let me tell you about Kim Carlsberg, ufologist, abductee, photographer, author, artist, highly respected source on the UFO contactee issue. Kim's new book, The Art of Close Encounters, compiling 150 individual encounter experiences by other contactees. Nice job, by the way, Kim. How are you?
Thank you very much, George. I'm great.
My pleasure. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us how this all happened to you and just what kind of a childhood you had. And let's go through that.
Sure. Well, I had a very average childhood. I'm from Missouri, I believe, like you are.
Yep.
Kansas City.
Born in Detroit, but I moved to St. Louis in 1979.
Yeah. Typical Midwest upbringing, good values, neighborhood where I didn't have to lock my doors at night. And I always had this dream of being a photographer and artist in the most creative city in the world, and my world at that point.
Yeah.
And that was Los Angeles. So I made my way to Los Angeles when I was in my early 20s. I graduated from the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and I was actually one of the first women in the photography department. I went on to be the first woman in the Hollywood Camera Union, and I had a really, really great life. I mean, I worked hard. I had my challenges, but I accomplished some great things and spent my life in beautiful places with amazing, interesting people. It's always difficult to talk about personal experiences, even though I've done it 100 times. But
is it emotional or just difficult for you?
It's emotional because I know how many people still live in that little box, that people who have had contact are crazy. As a matter of fact, I was going through my emails while the news was on, just biding my time, and I'm already getting hate mail, and I haven't even been on your show. So I just, I want to... Yeah.
There are haters out there. That happens.
Yeah. So I'm just, I'm a little... I shouldn't have opened that email before the show, but that's over.
They're 15-year-olds who have nothing to do.
Yeah. But, my experiences started in 1988, and like I said, I was doing really well. I had just graduated. I was working in Hollywood. At the particular night that changed my life forever, I was working on a movie called Pee-wee Big Top with huge circus animals for an entire week, and it was a strange enough week to begin with. But I was really exhausted. I was living with my boyfriend in Malibu on the beach.
Not bad.
Yeah, no, it was great, actually. Sunset Boulevard and PCH, you probably know it.
Know it well, yeah.
Yeah, the LA area. There's a house there that's on the historical record, and it's about a block north of Sunset, and we lived in this beautiful old mansion with these 3 huge windows that overlook the entire Santa Monica Bay. Greg, my boyfriend at the time, was a pentathlon, so he was always early into bed and early to rise. So when I would come home late on shoots, he'd already be in bed.
Yeah.
So this night, I, tiptoed into the house. I went to the little, refrigerator, grabbed a beer, popped it open, hadn't even had a sip yet, sat down at the window, put my feet in the seal, and I noticed this light on the horizon at the south end of the Santa Monica Bay, down by Palos Verdes. And this light was just too bright to be a star. It was too low to be a star. It was too high above the horizon to be a boat, and it just captured my attention. I stared at it for a few minutes, and the next thing I know, this thing shot across the bay in an instant, in breathtaking speed, and landed at Point Doom. So at that point, I thought, oh, my God, I've just seen something entirely out of this world. Greg's asleep behind me, but by the time I get back there to wake him up, at the rate this thing moves, it's going to be gone by the time I get back. So I continued to stare at it. A moment later, it popped across the ocean again, and it hung in front of my window, about, 20 feet away.
Jeez.
It hung over the beach, and that was my first sighting, my first conscious sighting. It hovered a few minutes, took a dash across the sky, disappeared into the stars, and disappeared forever.
Do you think it was trying to get your attention?
It certainly got my attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 2 weeks later, I woke up into my first abduction scenario. So I can't dismiss that was some kind of wake-up call. Or it just couldn't have been a coincidence.
Or maybe it already happened the night before and you just didn't have any recollection.
It could have been. Absolutely could have been. Most people of contact, it starts in childhood.
Yes.
And continues throughout their life. So, it could have been.
Describe this object, if you can.
I called it the moon over Malibu. It was about 40 to 50 feet in diameter, like the moon, like this white glowing orb in fog. And I thought I saw the silhouette. Now, I'm a photographer. I'm pretty visual. The silhouette of two entities in the craft. But I'm not sure about that. You know how the moon, you see the face, the man in
That's
in the
right.
moon?
That's right. It had that kind of look to it.
Exactly. So a couple weeks later, I came home from another shoot, went to bed as usual. Greg was asleep.
He was always sleeping.
He slept a lot. He slept early, but he got up early and he worked hard.
Sure.
I went to bed, woke up, and I was no longer in my bed. I was in what I thought was an elevator. I was naked, and I was paralyzed. My nose was pressed against a cold.
Were you conscious?
Totally, absolutely conscious.
Okay.
My nose was pressed against a cold door. My ex-boyfriend from many years previous was standing next to me.
In the elevator?
In the elevator. He was naked and paralyzed, but he was completely out of it. I could tell he had no idea, that he was not conscious and he didn't know what was going on.
Okay, so no reaction from him at all.
Completely numb. Yeah. And then I started receiving telepathic information, I believe, for the first time in my life. I knew there was a woman standing next to him. I couldn't see her, but I was told somehow that she was a makeup artist. Next moment, the door opens from the middle like an elevator door, pulls apart. We're pushed from behind into a large room with hundreds of tables that are only a couple feet off the ground, and these tables are filled with unconscious human beings. And at that time, I had never heard of abduction or the Greys, and I noticed there were hundreds of these little tiny off-white beings running around this room doing things to these human beings.
This must have been a huge room.
Huge room. I couldn't see the ends of the room.
Okay.
Yeah. And at that time, I coined them the anorexic Pillsbury Doughboys. That was the closest thing that came to my mind. And the story began there, and I had 8 years of constant contacts until I learned how to make them.
Now, these beings, were they scurrying around all over the place? Were they dressed? Or were they just all gray, skin-like?
They looked like the anorexic Pillsbury Doughboys. It was like they were naked, or maybe,
It was a covering of some type.
Yeah, some kind of plastic covering, because it had no definition whatsoever.
Big heads, big eyes.
Big heads, big eyes, about 3.5 feet tall, very indescript. They were doing things to these humans One would be at the head of the human, and the other would be at the wrist, and the other would be at the genitals. And all of these human beings were unconscious, and I knew that I was going to be on that one of those tables next.
Was there any sound at all coming from anybody there?
Only me.
Only you?
Only me.
What were you saying? Oh, my God?
I started screaming at the top of my lungs. There were 4 entities to the right outside of the elevator in this room.
Everybody seemed to be unconscious or in a different state except you.
Yes.
Did they do that by accident or on purpose?
I don't know, George. I just tell people, I'm Irish and I'm hard-headed, and I realized when this was going on that I had probably been putting out this message to them that I wanted to be conscious for many, many years.
When you screamed, did they all look at you?
When I screamed, 2 taller grays that were in kind of a uniform walked up to me. One slapped me on the back of the neck, and I knew that I was going to be unconscious any second because it felt like I had just been anesthetized.
Well, slap you to hurt you or again, to do something? To
knock me out. When
he
slapped me on the back of the neck, he put something in me that was meant to knock me out.
Okay, like he had a shot or some kind of injection?
Yes.
Okay.
Another tall gray came up and within 2 inches of my face with these huge black eyes stared at me just waiting for me to collapse.
And then he was going to catch you, I guess.
I don't know. I never made it that far.
So down you went, right? You were out.
I went out. I went completely out. I woke up later in a small room sitting on a table with one of the grays sitting next to me. And I was in the room that I was in was very dark.
Sitting on the table or lying down on it?
No, he was actually not. I don't even think he was on the table. He was just to my left.
Okay.
And I was concentrating on this arched doorway because the room outside was very well lit.
Did it look like you were inside of a craft or a building?
A craft.
Okay.
Yeah. Now that I know the difference, because I've been taken to many different places. And at this point, a being appeared in this arched doorway, and because the room outside was, brightly lit, and the room I was in was dark, she was almost silhouetted, and I could see that she had this patchy blonde hair, and that it was female. And I started screaming out to her. I said, "I'm a female. Don't you see how you're a female? Don't you see how terrified I am? Won't you please help me?" And I forgot the point. I thought she was going through chemotherapy because her hair was so, patchy.
Okay,
and that was
I see.
One of the,
like almost baldish.
Yes. So, while I'm screaming out to her for help, she just sent me this huge telepathic communication. Why don't you stop being such a big baby, and this will be over with soon enough?
Trying to calm you down.
Actually, she was just being rude.
A rude E.T.
She was rude. She was angry. She had had enough of me. So at that point, I realized this didn't follow any kind of logic that I understood, and I just shut up and sat there, and the next thing I knew, I was back in bed. Greg was exactly where he was when I was taken, and,
Well, Kim, how do you know this wasn't one incredible dream?
Are you dreaming now?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But who knows anymore?
Yeah, well.
I could be living in a dream.
That's
for all
true.
I know. My dream state could be my real life. So you're saying that you know the difference between an obvious dream and something that is very real to you.
I'm glad you asked that, George, because I wrote my first book in 1995, and it was derived from my diary entries over those 8 years of contact. And I purposely named it Beyond My Wildest Dreams because after studying this phenomenon all these years, I realize, and I know how crazy this sounds because it all sounds crazy, so I'm not going to edit at this point. I do believe that there's an element of other dimensionality to these scenarios. And I believe that our consciousness was created for this 3D reality, and that when we are taken out of it, it's like you're taken out of the air and thrown underwater. It's similar to being, awakened underwater. You know that you're in a different atmosphere, a different environment that you're not used to. It's hazy. You don't understand it. You can't breathe. It's like that. And I think the more my experiences went on, my consciousness adapted to this other environment, and I became totally conscious during these experiences. Now, this is, just one part of the theory or, the idea of what goes on, but it is definitely a big part of it. And I wanted other people to know. I've heard so many people say, well, I had a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a typical alien contact. But they weren't set up consciously to comprehend it like that.
Well, okay, let me ask you some questions about this abduction of you.
Yes.
What do you think they wanted?
I know what they wanted.
All right, what do they want?
They wanted my DNA to create hybrid races.
And what are they going to do with these hybrids?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer.
I have thought several things. One, they need these hybrids for their own planet.
Okay.
But if that's the case, I'm thinking, well, maybe their planet has changed, and these hybrids are the only thing that are going to be able to survive after they die off. So I thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
The other possibility that they're going to bring them all here when something happens to this planet, or they're going to eliminate us all and bring them here.
If I had to choose door number 1, 2, or 3,
Yes.
I would choose door number 2.
They're going to bring them here.
I believe some of them are already here.
Why do they want to mix them with us? Maybe to create a better race?
Absolutely. I've met many of my hybrid children, and they are exceptional beings. They are so superior to the Greys and to the humans in so many ways because they've got the best of both worlds, the best of both species.
Well, I've long suspected that if ETs were monitoring this planet, they would probably have to come to the conclusion, generally, because there are a lot of great people on this planet, and I think more so than bad, but they'd have to make a conclusion that this is a crazy, crazy civilization, that it's a warmonger civilization. It hates, and it does some very horrible things.
We are the children with the guns to them. We are an inferior race. Even though they may have created us, we are still inferior in our spirituality and our technology and our respect for each other and the earth. We have so much evolving to do, and I believe they are trying to help us evolve. As brutal as the abductions can be, and believe me, George, they are frightening. They are terrifying. They destroy your life. But all that said, my opinion is they are trying to help us. They're creating these hybrid races. They're beautiful. They're amazing. They don't do it lightly. When they create a child and they present me with a child and it's healthy and has a wonderful consciousness, they're so proud, and they want you to be proud with them. I met my daughter, April. I have 2 daughters that I remember most distinctly, Aqua and April. April, the last time I saw her, she was about 13, and she was just magnificent.
Where is she now?
I wish I knew, and I will spend my life searching. I believe she's on a craft somewhere. She was 13 then, but that was back in 1995.
But you can't rule out the possibility that either we will eradicate ourselves or something will wipe us out, and they're going to want to jumpstart this planet again. That is a possibility.
I think they're jumpstarting it proactively. I think they're here preparing and preparing us for what might happen.
And what could that be? I mean, do you see a calamity at all?
More than anything, I've been shown the destruction of the planet by our hands. And, in every contact, some of my, the quotes from them, it's time to save Mother Earth from her inhabitants. If you see something is happening and you turn your head in denial, you are just as responsible as anybody. And they were always referring to the planet.
Kim, did they ever tell you where they were from?
Not only did they tell me, it was almost a joke. I woke up from an experience where they spelled out Zeta Reticuli 1 letter at a time.
Well, that's exactly where the Benny and Barney Hill aliens came from.
That's what they told me.
Same ones. They're still coming around then.
Yeah.
And when you say almost a joke, how come?
Well, it was, Z-E, Z-E-T, Z-E-T-A.
Trying to tap it out almost, huh?
Right.
Did they give you anything as a memento of your visit here, your abduction, or anything like that?
Oh, I so wish. And, people are always asking me, you're a photographer. Why didn't you ever get a picture at least? And I said, you don't understand. It's not like that. First of all, my cameras are stored away in, a safe in my studio. When they come for you, you're paralyzed, and you're in another state of consciousness.
Yeah, it's not like you can go say, hold on, let me go get my Nikon or whatever.
Yeah, so I didn't get any mementos. And because of this problem of not being able to photograph them, it was one of the main reasons I decided to do The Art of Close Encounters.
All right, Kim, hold on. We're going to come back in just a moment. I want to ask you about the propulsion system. If you saw anything outside of that room, we'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And our special guest, Kim Carlsberg. Hey, by the way, I'm leaving on a jet plane tomorrow morning on my way to Albuquerque. Got a major event at our affiliate there, KKOB, and then we're going to do the show live there with Richard C. Hoagland and Dr. Robin Falco as we talk about alternative medicine and radiation spilling over here. And Richard has just a whole list of incredible topics, including Comet Elenine. Anyways, we'll be back in a moment with Kim Carlsberg on Coast to Coast AM. Kim, when you were aboard the craft, could you tell what kind of propulsion system it had?
Oh, I wish, George. No, not consciously, but I know I had many, many experiences before I became conscious. I went to a hypnotherapist by the name of Yvonne Smith. You probably know her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was phenomenal. I only did 4 regressions with her to blend some pieces of the puzzle. But after I wrote my book in 95, and I dropped out for 15 years. And I came back. I was drawn back in. And when I came back, I ran into Yvonne, I guess it was this year at the UFO Congress in Phoenix. And we talked, for a long time about what has the continuation of my story through her book. She says that the stories were all the same and the same things happening. Let's see, what was the question?
If you knew about the propulsion system.
The propulsion, that's right. So
tried to trick me, didn't you?
Yeah, you did. Anyway, I was going to ask Yvonne to take me back a few times in the near future because there's some things that I know that I don't know, and perhaps those are one of them. I know that one time I was shown a wall full of glyphs, and I didn't think much of that until I met Stan Romanek, and he talks about the glyphs, the language that they showed him, and it turned out to be something really important. So, I know there are a lot of things that I don't have conscious recall of.
Well, do you think you were in just a one room of this craft, or were you in the entire middle of whatever this craft looked like?
Well, I had to have been in several rooms. Speaking of Yvonne Smith, one of my very first regression, I found myself, I was strapped to a table in an examination room, and I was surrounded by 4 grays, and there was a woman standing over my shoulder in the background holding a red rose. And that story was very significant to me because later on I was supposed to be speaking at MUFON LA, and Yvonne came in with this woman who apparently recognized me right away. I didn't know who she was. Mm-hmm. And Yvonne went on to explain to me that her name was Kathleen, and she had come to her a few weeks after or a couple months after I had started going to her, and said that this woman described the scenario of me being strapped at this table, described the scenario exactly, described me exactly, and Yvonne knew at that minute that it was me she was talking about. So I've been to, I obviously was in many rooms. I've been in many rooms and in many buildings. I've been taken to underground bases. I've been strolled down hallways, strapped to a table, being escorted by 4 grays with tons of military personnel standing in the hallways that were so used to seeing abductees in this position that they didn't even...
You're talking about U.S. military?
U.S. military that didn't even look at me when I was being pushed down this hallway. on this table.
So you're convinced there's some kind of a reciprocity here?
Oh, absolutely. I've had 4 or 5 encounters that had to do with military alone, military with the Greys, military with other species. Yeah, and I must say that my military experiences were far more devastating to me than my...
What did they want with you?
I believe that they want to know... Well, there's so many different scenarios going on. It's absolutely crazy, George.
I mean, did they interrogate you?
Absolutely. They interrogate you. They want to know what you know. They don't want you to speak. My book was optioned by TriStar in 95, 96. And 2 or 3 months into production, I mean, I was meeting with these people in Santa Monica every day. We were casting. We were going to do this movie. And one day I called the producer, and he didn't answer the phone. No one answered the phone for days and weeks and months.
Well, maybe they went on vacation.
You don't go on vacation
not
in the middle
for
of a production and not tell anybody.
No, that's true.
Yeah, so I really believe the government had something in it, the military, government, whoever they are.
They put you on the list, didn't they?
They did. I've been chased by black helicopters.
Well, what did the military want in this interrogation? Was it obviously something that they weren't getting from the ETs they needed to find out from you?
They want to know, just like you, they want to know what I know. They want to know what I've seen. Fortunately, I hadn't seen a propulsion, so they couldn't drill it out of me, and they couldn't use me for that kind of technology that I consciously remembered. But what's so funny about it is, a lot of the experiences of mine were the ETs and the military together. So that has to be a different segment. It can't be the same military and ETs as the military that are trying to find out what's going on with me when I'm being pushed down a hallway on a table and they can see what's happening. Right?
Did you see any ETs at some control panel or anything like that?
Control panel? No.
Okay, so you have no idea how the ship was being guided, how it was moving, who was moving it. You were primarily stuck in some large hospital-looking room.
Yes.
Do you know if you were taken any place? Do you know if this craft was merely sitting on the surface of the planet here, or were you out in the space somewhere? I
have been taken to a place a couple of times that I can only describe as another planet. One of my experiences that happened over and over again, I would wake up terrified because I had been put into a tank of liquid and forced to breathe in the liquid.
Like dunked?
Yes, like put into a tank of liquid and the lid put on. So I couldn't go up. I had to stay under the liquid until I had to breathe in. And when I did, I always expected to die. And each time I didn't die.
So you could breathe freely underwater.
I could breathe in this liquid, whatever it was.
Whatever it was.
And it forced me out of my body. I would find myself hovering over my physical body looking down. Now, I don't know if that was from the stress and the trauma of knowing that I was going to breathe in this liquid that I left my body. I don't know if it was something that the aliens did intentionally, maybe suspecting that once somebody has an out-of-body experience, they would be a little more opened, enlightened, or that, that was just a result of what happened. But, after I saw the abyss, I went, oh, my God, that's what happened to me. And in several experiences, when I woke up in these places that I can only describe as another, environment, not of this earth. Were you on the craft or were you outside of the craft? I was, the most significant experience I remember, I was coming into consciousness while I was inside of a courtyard that was created by these monolithic rock formations that looked natural, on first inspection, but I realized immediately were made to be a landing pad as I looked up and this huge mothership is landing on top of these formations, and a smaller craft dislodges, and I am taken into this smaller craft. I went unconscious. I woke up back. At that time, I was actually camping in a place called China Lake. It's in California.
Yeah.
And little did I know that it was actually China. I was told it's a beautiful place to camp. It's absolutely gorgeous. But after my experience, somebody said, well, don't you know that's China Lake Naval Weapons Station? And I, maybe that had something to do with it.
What can you say about this planet they took you to?
Yeah.
What did it look like?
The planet was as if it was dusk. It was completely flat. You know, I live in Sedona now, and it had that Arizona
that desert look
to it. Yeah.
Any buildings?
No building. Well, no buildings in this particular experience, but in another experience there were buildings.
This may not have been their planet.
It may not have been, but I kind of assume it was because, I've heard that Zeta Reticuli might be like a desert planet. I don't know. It was just an assumption. But it was very dry, very flat, no vegetation, very dark orange sky, and that was about it.
Did you have any sensation of speed or traveling when you were in the craft? I mean, did you feel like you were moving?
No. Not.
Or no motion at all?
No, just like I was sitting here in this chair. It was very solid.
And does it make any kind of noise, the craft from within? Humming, anything like that?
No, the only noises I recall are, when they were coming to get me and I was in my bed, they would always paralyze me, and I would feel this buzzing sensation. I would hear a buzzing and feel a buzzing throughout my body. So kind of an electric sensation. Other than that, everything was telepathic, so I didn't hear voices.
Could you hear them move? Flopping along or anything like that?
No, I couldn't.
Did they move or did they float?
Did they move or they float? Well, the first experience, when I saw hundreds of those little guys kind of hovering around.
Hovering or walking?
Hovering.
See?
I don't recall them stepping. They just kind of seem to be kind of like buzzing around.
They're little hovercrafts.
Yeah, well, no, their bodies.
Yeah.
Not in the craft.
No, but their bodies were like little hovercraft. They didn't.
Yeah.
Maybe they weren't even touching the ground.
Maybe they didn't seem to be expending any energy like we do when we walk. So, but I have to tell you the end of the story about the other planet.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so when I was returned to my tent in China Lake, I was actually camping with a good friend of mine who was also a contactee. And it was really late. I could tell it was late. The tent was hot. She pulls open the tent and shoves a cup of coffee in my face, and she goes, I thought you were never going to wake up. And I said, oh, my God, I had this amazing experience last night. She looked at me, and she said, oh, my God, so did I. And I said, I don't want you to say a word. I want you to find 2 pens and 2 pieces of paper. I want you to go to the opposite side
independent
of the camp. I want you to illustrate what you saw, and I'll do the same. And I ended up putting those illustrations in my book. It turns out we drew exactly the same craft, only she was viewing it from a little bit different of a perspective where she was able to see the top, and I wasn't.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How many people do you think they are picking up, abducting, performing these hybrid experiments on, and then they're brought back? Hundreds and hundreds every day? How often?
My uneducated guess?
Yeah.
Millions.
And they may not be the only craft doing it. They might have a countless amount of spacecraft doing this, right?
Countless motherships the size of cities. Countless different species. I alone, in my 8 years, experienced 8 different types of ETs. So in my one little life, there was so much going on. I mean, I literally saw hundreds of people in these experiences. And I've met hundreds of people over the years in my research and my speaking engagements and my encounter groups, whatever. I've met thousands of people. I get thousands of emails. I mean, it's just, George, it's everywhere. It's in every country. It's going on all the time. And, that hate mail that I got when this evening began, it just makes me realize how much more important it is that I speak out and that people like me speak out so we don't have to live in this kind of ignorance. I mean, this is, I heard Brad earlier saying, and you saying you don't think disclosure will ever happen.
Right.
I was the first woman in the cameraman's union. I was the first woman in the photography department where I went to study. I've seen a lot of firsts in my life that people said will never happen. The woman will never get the vote. I believe that we will see disclosure, but it's not going to come from the government. It has to come from us. And like you said, an accident will make that accident happen.
It will not come from government.
Right. So, we've got to do the job.
Do you believe that these ETs are doing what they're doing with the government's help, or is there's nothing they can do to stop it?
I believe it's a little bit of everything, because there are so many different ET species interacting with us. There are different agendas. I believe the ETs can do whatever they want to do. They obviously have superior power, but and I do believe that our government is hiding technology. So it's not cut and dried. It's all of it, and that's what makes it so confusing.
Are you glad that you're an abductee?
Yes. And I can't believe I said that. That's the first time I've said that outright in my life.
Really?
Yeah. I always tell people I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I got so much out of it in so many different ways. Now that I look back on this long life of mine with all this high strangeness, I do want to thank them for letting me know the truth about our grander cosmos, our grander reality. I like waking up knowing that we're living in lies, as hard as that is to say, because I've been granted the truth. I know the universe. I know that it's this beautiful, abundantly occupied multiverse of all these different beings, and it's so rich. My interactions with the ETs have given me extra powers, Our communication is telepathic, so that has activated my telepathic ability.
Is this still happening for you?
No, not like it did before.
Do you wish that would happen?
No.
You're glad that part is over.
Yeah, the hybridization process was brutal, like I said. I don't fear that anymore because I'm older. I'm not going to be used for that kind of thing anymore. So I'm more open to the idea of reopening contact. I was actually the one who stopped it. Let's see. Brad said something earlier. I believe it was Brad or someone who called in, so I'm sorry, said that you can tell them to not abduct you, and they can't. Well,
yeah, that was a caller.
Yeah, I don't know how easy it is to tell them no when you're paralyzed and you're strapped to a table. It took me 8 years. But after 8 years, I decided I had had enough. I wanted the abductions to continue because I wanted to know what was really going on. And it took me 8 years to figure it all out. And then after 8 years, I said, okay, I get it. I know what's going on. It's time to stop. And then I insisted that they stop, and eventually they did.
Did you ever ask yourself why it even started in the first place?
Sure, all the time. Why me?
Why you?
Why me? And all I can conclude is from